There is a lot to unpack here, folks. And hey, the rain didn't come after all. But I am quite certain that many of you out there did come to the conclusion that Isack Hadjar really does belong in Formula 1. Come off it. Not only did he smash past my 30-point target in securing his future, but he also smashed the trophy. Oh my god, it's spread from Lando! Although, to be fair, it looks like Isack didn't mean for that to happen. That he was simply trying to put the trophy down carefully, but it was just that little bit too hard, and there was just a clink, and then whoa! But in all seriousness, though, he didn't flinch throughout the entire race. He didn't get passed by George Russell. He fended off Leclerc for so many laps. He managed to hold off in a V-carb a Ferrari and a Mercedes. This was definitely the response to Lawson's recently good, solid take of points in the last few races. After Hadjar having a bit of a wobbly moment in the middle half of the season, oh no, he's come back from the summer, wham! 15 points in one go. They could catch up to Williams at this rate. This is incredible, and this is meant to be the junior Red Bull team. The first ever driver of Arabic descent being French-Algerian. Congratulations, a huge monumental feat for the region. And I know there'll be some people out there that will be saying that, oh, Hadjar only got lucky because of Lando's retirement. Well, hey, stop it. This is a very important, significant milestone for this kid, who wasn't quite sure he even belonged in Formula 1. Well, he does belong, because Alain Permain, the team boss, said this was absolutely perfect, and that he had no doubt in his mind that Isack could do the business, having started from 4th. And he wasn't bluffing, Alan. That car deserved to be there on merit, because again, it managed to hold up a Ferrari and a Mercedes. It didn't show any signs of slowing down. And also, he didn't let Verstappen get that far ahead of him. That is something to really note here. What needs to be said here is that this was a really strong performance, and all credit goes to Hadjar. Well done. But the biggest giant that he wasn't able to take down was Oscar Piastri. Having a quiet practice stint before snatching pole by the narrowest of margins, ironically, thanks to the other V-carb in part, he goes and gets his first ever Grand Slam. Because Piastri was able to do what Zandvoort rarely allows drivers to do, having total control without any signs of struggling. And okay, the multiple safety cars did prevent us seeing tyres really giving up the ghost in a meaningful way, save for Pierre Gasly with his one-stopper, but we did have no real radio signals from Oscar that he was struggling in any way, shape or form. There were moments when Lando was able to do a bit of a dive bombing to try and overtake into Tarzan, but they were very few and far between. For the most part, it was between 1.5 and 4 seconds. Yes, Piastri wasn't able to do what Lando was able to do last year, but in the context of the entire race, I don't think that's the way Oscar operates. I'm really starting to notice a few things. He doesn't go for those big blockbuster over double-figure finishes. No, he does enough to preserve the tyres in case his rivals come back at him toward the end of the race. That means he has some rubber in which to be able to defend. And it worked out perfectly. Andrea Stella said the failure on Norris's car was on the chassis side in their first reliability stint in a long run, which explains why Piastri's careful tone was there, because he didn't want to be seen profiting that way in his interviews afterward. It was handled well, I think, in that regard, but the numbers do not lie, because the win stretches his title lead to 34 points. As Martin Brundle would say, he has a win in his pocket, and that is a very important psychological boost for the Australian after we got the tit for tat over the last few races, almost something that could be potentially, in terms of Lando's psyche, akin to Brazil last year, where he could have easily gotten close to Verstappen, but then it all fell apart. I don't think it's over yet. I certainly think there is more that Lando can offer here, but what Piastri was able to do was come back from the summer and prove the doubters wrong. End Lando's streak, get his first ever Grand Slam at a track which realistically would not be able to afford that to many drivers, as well as equaling his win tally that he shares with Mark Webber now. And most importantly, we've started to find out that he doesn't let the dominance of Lando in FPs 1 through 3 all the way into Q2 get the better of him. And we should also really be prepared for the fact that Monza is a track that Oscar likes, because did you see what he did in those first 2 chicanes of lap 1? Crazy stuff. Then Max Verstappen is another winner. He is great when he's got a flawless car, but when the car isn't flawless, I think we get something better. We get a really good show. Because Red Bull rolled the dice on softs for both cars at the start, and Max made them pay off early, vaulting to second, briefly dicing with Norris, before then settling into a day in the office behind the 2 McLarens. That pass into turn 3, he nearly lost the car, but he didn't. He kept it together and got the pass to convert. That was incredible. That is remarkable stuff. Again, I feel like when the chips are down and Max has a car which is not 100%, we get to see 100% of him, maybe even more than that. That was absolutely wild. Fantastic car control. And yeah, the RB21 hasn't suddenly become a really fantastic car again. It does still suffer in some shape or form in the low-speed corners, but the safety car was a very advantageous opportunity, and the soft tyre start was something that did work in Verstappen's favour, as well as Tsunoda's favour in the long run, although it did get a little bit wobbly in the middle half of the race. But we're talking about Max here. He wasn't going to be able to get anywhere close to Oscar, and I think even he knew that it was going to be a struggle. But with Lando, we did get some really good moments where he could give the Brit a little bit of a fight. Although I did appreciate the gusto after the safety car restart where he did try and get Piastri. Lauren Mekis framed the soft start as the only realistic chance at disrupting Papaya, and it certainly did work in making life not too easy for McLaren. It was a bold move, which I think did work out. And now, just look at where Red Bull are right now with Yuki and Max's haul of points. They are only 34 points behind Mercedes in P3. It's not impossible, folks, for them to suddenly not be fourth anymore. For a home race, I think this is a great result, and I'm pretty sure all the Dutch fans were happy with the outcome, that once again, their guy was on the podium. Maybe that corner, I think it's turn 6 and 7, he wants that to be named after him, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable request, wouldn't you? But hey, great way to rebound after Hungary, which was a horrible weekend for him. And the same thing would go for Haas, because sure, they are still 9th in the Constructors, but come on, a double points finish after starting 18th and 19th? Yeah, all of us thought it was a done deal, including me in my qualifying winners and losers. Especially having Oliver's car starting from the pit lane after Haas decided to go F it and found out with a pit lane start by changing his engine. So how about 9 points for their trouble? That'll do. They started on the hard tyres from the get-go. They didn't do a Lance Stroll where they moved on to hard tyres after a few laps. They began it and committed. They remained steadfast. They remained focused. And wouldn't you know it, they then stopped the mediums, and both Ocon and Behrman managed to get into the top 10, having started near the back. Burns from the stern. And Oliver Behrman's burn from the stern was his best ever yet, one higher than his debut for Ferrari at Jeddah last year, going from pit lane start to 6th. Wow, there is a future for Oliver in this sport, and Haas, they got a good one here. Haas are still within the hunt, within the midfield. It's just a little bit hamstrung at the moment, but what a clapback, considering that the likes of Racing Bull scored points, Aston Martin scored points. Ocon mirrored the template, as I said, and he managed to pick up 8 places. And yeah, it was only a point, but I think Haas will take it. They were frisky. That got them results. They were brave. They didn't blink. They had the stomach to convert. And one thing is for sure, the days of old where Haas would chew through their tyres, oh, they're long gone at this point. It's the sort of a no-fuss Sunday that midfield teams like Haas really, really need. They're all concerned, including the morale of their own drivers. And hey, I'm pretty sure that Esteban would have felt very satisfied for jumping both Alpines and keeping one of them right behind him all the way to the end. That would have been really good for him. And also, it would be very good for Oliver's books within Ferrari, because I do think that Oliver's going to be replacing Lewis Hamilton when the 7-time champion eventually does call it a day. And as for Alex Albon, it was another case of, another one, thank you. Another P5 for the Thai driver, and this one was probably the sweetest one yet, especially considering he had his little tirade at the team the day before, and his teammate started from 9th. The script was completely flipped, and Albon profited, to the point where now he and Kimi Antonelli have both 64 points to their name. Albon is tied with a Mercedes driver. And that is incredibly ironic considering that many rumours last year, before Antonelli was confirmed, were plumping Alex for the seat next to Russell, his bestie. And honestly, his race was built upon those first few 100 metres going into turn 1. He, as the likes of Alonso and Bortoleto really dropped down the order, he went up the order 5 places within the first lap. He was already within the points, right behind his teammate. And considering that Williams are in a bit of a dire strait at the moment in them having growing pains regarding operations, well, this operation turned out to be relatively smooth. But not for the smooth operator himself. We'll get to him in a moment. And one thing you've got to really note here is that Williams are only now 3 points away from matching their 2017 points tally. The last season where you could really say that Williams were at least a decent midfield team, that they weren't near the back. They only need an 8th place and they've done the business. And Aston Martin deserved to be here too. We all railed against Lance Stroll for wrecking 2 cars prior to the race, but credit where it's due here. he managed to lead the team into another double points finish, him getting up to 7th from the back. A scruffy, then oddly satisfying day, I would think, for all concerned. Like I touched upon earlier, Lance dived in for some hard tyres, Aston Martin taking a little bit of a cheeky punt, saying that, oh, we don't think it's going to be raining. And it did rain a little bit, spitting, but not nearly enough to make too much of a difference. I think the McLaren's only lost a few tenths or so, negligible almost, and that was a really good and accurate read. It is, honestly, Lance's 2 extra points that keep VCarb away from overtaking them in the constructors. You gotta let that sink in. You may not be a Lance fan, but that is what Stroll was able to do. And it wasn't like Fernando Alonso wasn't able to do anything, because he too was able to recover from a really terrible start. Those first few corners, I saw the footage. Oh, turn 3 was absolutely woeful. And we managed to get another one for the radio collection. A nice little throwback to 2018 when they were asking about the balance and then Fernando blasted out, I don't know. And also, I want to point this out here, especially to the chap from Aston Martin I saw within Hungary, the Hungarian paddock. They all did a fantastic job. They worked themselves to the bone in recovering Stroll's car twice, having to break curfew for it. So you all deserve a pat on the back for that one. And you too are winners within the Aston Martin fold. It was chaotic, but it managed to secure them a good 10 points. And that was very important considering VCarb were able to score 5 more. And it does make you wonder, had Fernando had a better start and not had that wriggly first 2 corners, then maybe he might have been in contention for the top 5. And if anyone's thinking that Adrian Newey's not touched that car in any way, shape or form, you are wrong. And to wrap things off, Tsunoda, Yuki. That's more like it. He lived on the edge for the entire race, matching Max's soft tyre plan, and dragged that car finally to P9, despite having a late throttle and power gremlin, meaning that the safety cars were arriving at bad times for him. He kept tumbling down the order. He did very well in holding off Esteban. May not sound like much, but this Red Bull is all over the place, and Yuki had something within him to be able to do the deed. Him really feeling confidence from the sense that now he feels like Helmut Marko, the now co-director of Red Bull Racing, alongside Laurent Mekies, can see that Yuki can do well if he's given a car which is practically identical to Max. That, oh, wouldn't you know, if you actually don't hoard parts of Verstappen that he's probably never going to use because, well, the Dutchman is too good to break parts willy-nilly, then it might translate into the second car scoring points and then getting closer to getting back into touch with Ferrari, who scored nothing today. And context really matters here. Red Bull's window is narrow here, and Tsunoda has worn a lot of the test pilot work when the big team diverges on setup. It's only now he's got a car which he can actually go toe-to-toe with Max and deliver some points. It's very good for convincing the team to maybe keep him on for next year once Honda departs. And Mekies himself said the trend is positive, and timing hurt him, and his path mirrored Max's plan. But the neutralizations blunted him, whereas with Max, it kept him in the hunt. Really goes to show that the midfield traffic train really can compromise somebody's race. Max didn't have that problem, Yuki did. He scored points, so as far as I'm concerned, that's a win. And now I'm going to have to call upon the solid category, because I can't place this driver in the winners list, but I certainly don't want to put him in the meh section. So I came this close to filling this pint with cola, because we nearly had a cola pinto. Not many people were talking about this, but Franco P11. Fantastic! That is 2 places higher than Jack Doohan was able to do. So credit where it's due here. He came close, and he knew it. It felt like a point 11th, and he did manage to make some points to the team and the press. He's getting better. He's managing the car which was thrust upon him instead of a Williams he helped develop in the simulator. And Alpine themselves split strategies, leaving Gasly to try the audacious one-stopper, which was convention last year, whilst Franco got softs and started a 2-stopper plan, which was able to work with fresher tyres thanks to the safety car. Unfortunately, he did run out of laps in trying to chase down Ocon for 10th. It got really close though. It looked like if it had just been a couple of more laps, he might have been able to do it. Or arguably, many people are saying that it was a combination of the swapping of positions between the 2 Alpine drivers, which did happen. Franco was asked to yield for Gasly, and then Gasly likewise. It might have meant that Franco lost a little bit of time, and that might have made all the difference for him getting his first ever point. It's just some kind of moral boost, especially for Flavio Briatore, who's been getting a lot of stick regarding Franco's potential and performance, and why did they replace him? Well, I think this was proof positive. There were moments when Colapinto was able to shine against Gasly, but the fact is, though, is that Franco nearly scored. he actually was within the midfield. He did not embarrass himself. This is a really good bit of progress here. Yeah, it wasn't eye-catching enough to warrant many World Feed appearances, but it's something I felt like needed to be said. Then we start the meh section with George Russell. Fourth was tidy on paper, but messy on the bodywork. And especially his radio contact, that was far too combative. Charles escaping penalty for his daring and remarkable overtaking Russell, who then lost front grip and floor performance after that banging of wheel. And yeah, the stewards ultimately said, oh, it wasn't really anything, it was just an incident. And then that damage forced him to swap places with Antonelli. And the indignation in that man's voice, that was something that made me do a double take. He was like, I'm sorry, what? 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 You dare? I was like, geez, George, calm down, mate. And Andrew Shovlin did admit that they didn't really have the podium pace anyway, even if the car wasn't damaged. It was competent damage limitation at least, and the main upside was they scored more points than Ferrari. Then Liam Lawson. It was always going to be the lesser of the two racing ball hauls, as Lawson looked set for points, but not as many as Hadjar. He had no major errors before the Sainz clash detonated this afternoon. The move was around the outside at the first restart, with Lawson holding the inside, and the pair touched, which cut the Williams tyre, triggered stops that nuked both races. The stewards then deemed Carlos the one responsible, and Lawson escaped penalty, on the grounds that, according to the stewards, he owned the corner. He had the right to the corner, and Carlos did not because his axle wasn't ahead, and Alain Permain recognised that, saying that it was down to bad luck that Lawson's race was compromised and he finished outside of the points. And according to Permain, based on the performance that Hadjar was able to perform, Lawson could have found his way eventually between 5th and 7th or something like that, making some good progress. Yes, of course, the ruling from the stewards does rob us of some really good hard racing, because Carlos obviously did make a really ballsy attempt to overtake Liam on the outside. It didn't work out for him. It could have easily just been a racing incident, but we got what we got here. So one thing has to be made clear here is that Liam did not disgrace himself at all, especially afterward. He was not raging against the system. He wasn't getting really feisty. He was actually relatively measured, calm, and commiseratory. The fact that he was on for scoring some points, but it didn't come out for him, but it wasn't anything that he did directly. So the meh rating I give him, it's more of a deflated rather than just going, well, he wasn't anything special. Nothing like that at all. And then we start the losers. Lando is here not because he was a bad driver, but more to do with the outcome, the reality. He lost out on 18 points. Norris did do the hard part at the start and recovered from Max's Dan Dare move into turn 3, and then managed the tyre picture really well behind Piastri, and kept the pressure honest across multiple restarts. He managed to keep Oscar relatively honest, and managed to make some dive bombs, and I think one was down to when he didn't even have DRS, and that was a really gutsy move, but unfortunately, the guts of his MCL 39 chose that moment to bug out on him. The McLaren has been really bulletproof for many years at this point. I think the last mechanical failure was like in 2021 or something. It was bound to happen. It was just unfortunate it happened to Lando. And this kind of situation is something that reminds me of Hamilton's engine failure at Malaysia 2016. That one mechanical retirement can make all the difference. Or it might be completely negated. Piastri might have a mechanical fault later in the year, which then cancels things out. This is something for the future, and there is no way, shape or form that either driver is being favoured over the other at this point. This is down just to bad luck, unfortunate circumstances. McLaren said they traced it to the chassis side of things rather than driver error, which does explain the brutal optics of a racer watching his title rival extend the gap to 34, joining the two Ferraris for a picnic around the middle of the track. The memes were really hot for that one. But there was one thing that I saw which really made me smile, especially considering that this was the Dutch Grand Prix. Lando Norris right there with his helmet off, looking a bit dejected, but the crowd were cheering him on. That's really pleasing to me, that the Dutch fans understand that Lando was denied an opportunity to take the win through a mechanical fault, not anything of his own. And it was just, bad luck, mate. Good racing, though. So, hey, that was really pleasing to see. But the biggest knock-on effect will be a psychological one, although I will give Lando some credit that he handled this really well. The lowest point it really got was saying, I just want to have a burger and go home. And quite honestly, if I were in that situation, I'd probably just want to have a burger and go home. So, I get it. I get it. It wasn't anything that he did wrong. He had the pace, he had the potential, he managed it excellently. He didn't get flustered. He had some goes. He tried to send it, didn't work out for him, much like how it didn't work out for Oscar the other day. The team still believe in him. I don't think he has lost control because this was no fault of his own. It's McLaren who are to blame for the car giving out on him. But eventually, the math will math. especially if it goes back the other way again. If Lando gets it back down into single figures, it's all to play for again. And now we get to Ferrari. Their day collapsed at the same corner, after a torrid Friday, which was eased slightly with 6th and 7th in qualifying. And yeah, that corner is going to live on in the Tifosi's memory as one of their greatest nemeses. First, as we saw, Hamilton lost it coming out of turn 3. It was a really close one when he got a little bit too wide, there was a little bit of drizzle on paint. That doesn't work. It was by the narrowest of margins. He might have been able to squeak past the boundary and maybe just got some dirt on his tyres, but he might have been able to continue. It was the narrowest of escapes. And then Leclerc met a similar fate, and the satisfaction of getting past George Russell in arguably one of the best overtakes of the year was completely cancelled out due to Kimi Antonelli going a little bit too deep and then understeering right into the Monegasque, and then both of their races were completely and utterly over. And also, the ramifications going in to Monza. Monza is not the 0 points. I'm pretty sure that what the Sky Sports commentators were saying, that, oh, Ferrari doesn't care about the Dutch Grand Prix, they're putting all their eggs in the Monza basket. Well, the Monza basket's got a hole in it because Hamilton's got a 5-place grid penalty through something which you cannot forgive. It was utterly dangerous. I saw the footage, and Hamilton went steaming into the start-finish straight when the grid was full of people, celebrities, preparing the start. He was going at full speed, and that could easily be applied to anyone. If you flout a double-waved yellow situation, no matter who you are, no. I almost put Hamilton in the dark bit, but quite frankly, Ferrari's been through enough already. It's akin to the "stop, he's already dead" meme. So, yeah, I took pity on Ferrari today. So, I'm sorry, that was a completely justifiable penalty. And it's actually managed to hand Mercedes a little bit of a lifeline, especially considering that Antonelli himself lost a fair few points, and we'll get to him just in a second. So Ferrari, they're not going to be going after McLaren, that's for darn sure. And Mercedes are catching up with them, and now Red Bull is getting that little bit closer. It's not over for P2 between 3 teams. And okay, now we'll get on to Antonelli. The speed was real, though. He was on course for P6, and that would have been a lovely result after a month off, and having gotten a 10th in Hungary and not scored since before Imola, he wasn't that really far off where I predicted him in 5th. Until turn 3 showed up, and he set in motion a total of 15 seconds worth of time penalties. One for the incident with Leclerc, and then another for speeding in the pit lane. In total, he manifested about half an Ocon's worth of penalties. He just went right under at the bottom of turn 3, but then lost total front grip and went boom straight into Leclerc. That was a little bit of a greedy move, but Charles Leclerc was not all that mad, because I think he was already feeling a little bit down in the dumps over the whole performance of Ferrari, honestly. And Fred Vasseur accepted Kimi's apology, his read on the situation. I don't think the Tifosi are going to be completely lashing out their spitting rage at Kimi, because it's a very confusing situation. It's an Italian driver, but the Ferrari got taken out. What do you do? And also, I think Charles, like Max, is aware of rookie optics. He did not fly off the handle against Kimi at all. But it was also, I think, a very necessary bruise. As in, he won't be doing that again anytime soon. But he did have the pace for points, and that is something, I guess. And then for Carlos. Right now, I think of the Tom and Jerry meme of Buff Jerry breathing heavily, and a scared Tom, the FIA, trying to fend him off. Sainz did have the ingredients for pushing further than his initial 9th until the Lawson tangle. He tried to hang it around the outside, as I said, at the first restart, but instead got a puncture and then damage on the front wing. And then he got his 10-second penalty. And the thing that's really kept this story going is the aftermath, that he got the penalty, but after that, he tried to explain his situation after he got out the car, but then the FIA apparently didn't want to talk to him. Like, it was just complete, subject is closed, go away, Carlos. Even though Sainz was then told, oh, the FIA's doors are always open for consideration. No, they just didn't want to know. Whether or not this is something to do with his father, Carlos Sainz Sr., running for office against Mohammed bin Sulayem, who knows? I'm going to have to get the spanner of speculation out for that one. But, you know, it's interesting. It's a very interesting thought experiment. Doesn't necessarily make it true, though. But still, this is another example of Carlos having something really good, leading the Williams way from his start in 9th. He could have actually been up there, 6th and 7th at the end of it. Maybe Albon also getting some points, double points finish for Williams. Fantastic result at a track that nobody thought that Williams would be holding their own at. But unfortunately, it all fell apart again, with Sainz then finishing in the midfield, having to have all that repair damage as well as the 10-second one. But his one-lap speed did look real. That Q3 appearance, it goes to show that he is getting a handle on the FW47. There is progress being made here, but in terms of misfortune, being on the wrong side of the law, it's just, I don't need a spanner for that part. I was just holding it because, yeah, it feels powerful. Carlos did his part in giving Williams hope for Sunday after Albon crashed out in 15th in Q2. And then Sauber left Zandvoort with nothing, while direct rivals banked big, and it sent Sauber back down to 8th in the Constructors. Still in the hunt, but on the back foot, I think, after several races of really good results. With Hulkenberg, it was a case of what we saw from Sauber earlier on in the season. They tried everything they possibly could in terms of strategy, but it simply did not convert into points, or at least even trying for points. For Bortoletto, it was a more of an unfortunate situation. Apparently, he had a clutch issue at the start, which saw him falling down from 13th down to the back. Then he had a scrap with Colapinto, which caused some damage, and he was then investigated by the stewards. And then, to top it all off, he couldn't make those tyres last. They had to do a stop right at the end when Gabriel was in P10. That might have been a conciliatory point, which would have been a Herculean effort. I know I've said that a lot, but it's true. There is a lot to unpack here today, people. It was just not quite enough. Nothing here was catastrophic. I'm not saying that, oh, what Sauber was able to do in the last few races was a fluke or anything like that. It's just simply, this just didn't work out for them. They just didn't really have anything to answer. There were things going against them. Bortoletto looked like the stronger of the two drivers, that's for darn sure. But unfortunately, circumstance got in the way. Much like the case for Gasly, their circumstance being the gambler's version of Alpine's season. Staying out under early safety cars to protect track position, and then trying a one-stopper. It almost worked. For a moment there, I saw Pierre Gasly in 8th. I'm thinking, wow, okay, credit where credit is due here. Well done, Alpine. Well done, Pierre. But then, of course, the tyre cliff. Oh, it was massive. Monolithic. I saw him dropping 3, 4, 5 seconds a lap. For a second, I thought he would have been able to hold off Behrman, and then maybe the gap between Antonelli ahead of him would have been bigger than the 15-second gap that Kimi would have needed to survive in the points-paying positions until that safety car came around. Gasly then later called it a bet that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. It's not frustration, it's more like resignation. And given the lack of baseline pace this year, it was worth the try. It nearly worked. On another day, maybe that late safety car could have split the field and the bet would have cashed in. Here, though, he was left exposed, and it was up to his teammate to bring Alpine some hope, just missing out on the last few points. And you can just discuss amongst yourselves, with the foam of doubt, that maybe Colapinto was denied the opportunity through internal team politics. We will never know. This is the best that Alpine can do right now. It's not an outright terrible car, because there were other cars that finished behind them. They could outqualify other cars, but it's just not enough. That's the thing for Alpine this year. It's not enough. And if you've decided you've not had enough of me being on the ladder, then maybe you'd like this video. I will be right back. I just need to go and change clothes.